Hi everyone, I'm Steph,
Megan.
and welcome to another episode of Late Night Reads.
This week we are talking contemporary romance and covering Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry.
Let's start with why we selected Great Big Beautiful Life. I've been a fan of Emily Henry's books since Beach Read, and I've read all of them ever since, so I knew her latest one was immediately going on RTBR. It is not your typical romance book. Yes, we still get a love story and a happily ever after, but the premise of this book is much bigger than that. It is the type of book that I think could potentially change your life after reading it. It's such a powerful story and figuring out about like what matters most to you if you are at a crossroads in your life. I think it could be one of those life-altering books.
Definitely. And here are a few things that you should know about the author, Emily Henry. She is a New York Times, Sunday Times best-selling author. The Great Big Beautiful Life is her sixth novel, and three of her books, Beach Read, People We Meet on Vacation, and Book Lovers, are all in development to become films. And she actually lives in Cincinnati, Ohio, which, hey, I used to live there too, and Steph's right around the
Same.
corner. So
Yep.
fun.
So before we jump into this episode, a couple of key reminders. As always, this episode will contain spoilers. We assume if you are listening, you have read the book, you have been warned. This book also does contain topics that may be sensitive for some readers, including adoption, anxiety, cancer, car accident, cheating, cults, death, depression, divorce, emotional abuse, hospitalization, medical trauma, pregnancy, and sexism. Whew.
It's a lot. Oh my gosh, such a mouthful. And I don't think we've done one with that involved cults yet. So this is like a that's a new warning.
It's a new one.
Yeah. But now let's talk tropes. So first we have forced proximity. Alice and Hayden both want the same thing, to be the author of the biography for the elusive Margaret Ives. And she's made it into a competition with both of them spending a month meeting with her in a small town in Georgia, basically on a small island. So the size of this town causes Hayden and Alice to run into each other on a regular basis, like multiple times a day. Next, you have Grump and Sunshine. Alice is, of course, full of optimism, and Hayden is not. He definitely isn't as grumpy once you get to know him, but he gives off a very grumpy vibe during Alice's first few interactions with him. Then you have Friends to Lovers. Alice really wants to be Hayden's friend from the very beginning, leaves him a little coffee and croissant. Sorry, green tea and croissant. But it takes him a little bit longer to get to the friendship level with her, and then eventually it turns into something more. But of course, it is a slow burn. So while the physical attraction is very evident early on between the two of them, it's definitely slow since Hayden is very leery of going too far with Alice since they're competing for the same job. Understandable.
So, in terms of drama, there's a lot to capture here and a lot of different characters. So, let's kind of dive into it. So, this is the biggest opportunity of Alice Scott's career. She's being considered to write a book about this mysterious tabloid princess, Margaret Ives. And this woman disappeared from the public decades ago, with everyone speculating about her whereabouts because she comes from one of the most famous families. It made me think a lot of like the Kennedys, is kind of like the vibe that I got. And then they have been like the story of countless high profile stories in the past. So
I
right
also
away,
kind of thought she was a little bit like almost like a Tori Spelling,
ooh,
you
I
know?
can see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But older.
But older, yes, of course. Yeah.
So right away, Alice is super optimistic and is that person who like sees the world with the glass half full mentality. And she's like kind of like I imagine her like coming into Margaret's house, like determined to convince her that she's the right person. I can help you tell this story and just rainbows and bunnies and cupcakes. But unfortunately, Alice learns very, very quickly that she's going to have some major competition in this kind of book deal. And that's when we meet Hayden Anderson, which is kind of like a really fun name. I mean, you think of Hans Christian Andersen. That's what I thought of when I read it.
Yes.
But imagine like showing up to like kind of what's a job interview, and then as you're leaving, oh, here's my next candidate. He's just a Pulitzer Prize winning biographer. No big deal. It'll be fine.
Competition. It's gonna
No
be
competition. It'll be fine.
yeah.
So that's kind of a big deal for Alice. And I think Margaret was very intentional on structuring the meetings so that they would see each other and so they would know that they were competing. And it's also very clear from the first moments you see Hayden on the page that he is the polar opposite of Alice, at least like as we kind of get to initially know him.
Yes. And since they are in a small town, the Little Crescent Island in Georgia, it is not surprising that Alice and Hayden run into each other at this place called the Fishbowl Restaurant, which reminds me of like a typical beach town seafood restaurant you'd find in Georgia or probably in Florida too. There's lots of bright decorations, extensive alcohol menu with super brightly colored drinks, fun and eccentric stay, menu containing mostly fried food, probably. This is also where Alice briefly meets Cecil, who owns the restaurant, and sends her just a complimentary Captain's Bowl drink, which I'm like, it probably is like this big and has like flashing lights in it, and just like crazy,
Like four straws is like what I imagine. Like it's too big for like
yeah,
one person to consume, but she will try.
she will try her best. And it's like blue, so you're like, what is this stuff? Okay. But at first you don't think much about this character. He just seems like a typical little side character that's used to kind of help you better understand town dynamics. But we learn later in this book, he plays a much bigger role in the whole entire story. So, in typical Alice fashion, she wants to get to know Hayden and sees him at the exact same restaurant, hiding in the booth, and she approaches his table. He is not excited to see her at all. He comes across as the type of person who takes their work and life very seriously and does not mix business and pleasure at all. So, assuming he even knows how to have fun, or at least what we thought at that point in the book, who knows? He immediately assumes that Alice is just intentionally asking him questions to try and throw him off his game, so he won't get the book deal. And that's not her intention at all. She's like, I'm just a nice person and I want to get to know you. But, the good news is here that Hayden's reaction makes Alice think she might actually have a real chance at securing this book over him. Like, oh, he's intimidated by me? Well, then maybe he doesn't have it in the bag and I can maybe win it. So you're like, go girl, go get it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And since it's a small town, of course they run into each other the next day when they go to the local coffee shop, and they end up getting each other's drinks. And Alice accidentally takes a sip of his green tea, which if you're expecting coffee and you get green tea, you're going to be very disappointed. One of the things I thought was, I get that it's a really small town, but it almost felt like there was some sort of cosmic force pulling them together because they kept ending up in the same places at the same time.
I like there's a cosmic force.
Yes.
Cosmic.
Mm-hmm. Never know.
Yeah, I like it.
There might be some spirit above trying to pull them together.
I think so.
Or that's just what I was hoping.
Yeah.
And so if it's, like Alice has been on this roller coaster, she sees Hayden and she's like, I'm not going to get this job. Then he, at the bar later, feels like, oh, maybe I have a chance. And then while they're running into each other at the coffee shop, Hayden gets a call from Margaret and she's just like, great. Well, but maybe it's possible that Margaret's going to turn him down. Let's just say Alice ends up in a little bit of a panic. And we start to learn a little bit about her very complicated relationship with her mom, who does not seem to respect what Alice does for a living whatsoever. And a lot more of that comes out in the book. But thankfully, Alice also gets a call from Margaret and invites her to dinner. And when it's time to have dinner at Margaret's, we're expecting, I went into this oh, that's good news. Alice is going to get the book deal. I mean, kind of. She shows up there and Hayden's also there. And she didn't tell either one of them.
Is this a setup? And yeah, it's totally a setup.
Totally a setup. I don't think she intended for them to fall in love, but it happens. But she wants them to spend a month together, and at the end of the month, she'll choose one of them to write her book. Or she might give up on the book altogether, and I'm like, what?
Right.
It's just a very weird dynamic. But at least she'll pay them and provide a housing stipend. But that's not what either of them thought would happen at this dinner. It also seemed really peculiar to me that she would do that with two writers, especially one who's a Pulitzer Prize winner. And that he would be willing to do that, because typically I feel like they would not tolerate that type of nonsense.
Yeah.
So, but they both want the book, and I get it. She's been very elusive, and they agree to her terms in her NDA. And this is one of the first points I realized there were two separate NDAs. She wasn't having them sign the same NDA, which is...
Wait, really?
Yeah.
They signed two separate ones?
They were each given a different NDA.
Well, I don't think I picked up on that. I think I just assumed it was the same one.
Mm-mm. And that the reason
Interesting.
is because like she doesn't want them to be able, she didn't want Alice to be able to tell anything that she learns to Hayden.
Yeah, I feel like that would have been covered in a typical NDA. I don't know, but it's yeah, it's really interesting that part right there.
Exactly. Because there's not a lot of breadcrumbs throughout this book, I feel like that lead us to like the ending. Even when you reread it like the second time, it's just it is a kind of a big twist. But upon leaving, like Alice is like she's the nice gal. She's like, let's discuss the schedule, Hayden. Like, what days do you want? And I want to make sure we have like equal time. And it's like whatever she suggests, he like intentionally is like difficult about and has a comment about and like provides suggestions or comments on why that's like a horrible idea. She's like, well, what if like you did Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I did, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. He's like, well, why would you get both like weekend nights? And she was like, okay, you can have Thursday, Friday, Saturday. He's like, well, do you not need to work? Like, I need to work for my, and I'm just like, can you just talk like a human? Like, what?
It sounds like two like divorced parents trying to figure out
Yes.
like their custody battle, you know? Like, okay, you get to babysit these days and you get to be with them this
This
day.
is
So,
why lawyers are typically involved in it because like it's just this weird awkward dynamic. But it
yeah.
also I think shows like he's very experienced more so than her in this type of situation because he's like very strategic about like why he would want certain days in order to have like a full picture of her life, which I don't think Alice was like really thinking a lot about.
Yeah.
And then, like, to further, illustrate that fate wants them brought together, they happen to be staying at the same hotel, which, like, that's not super surprising. It is a small town, and their rooms are right next to each other,
Was the best part. So
right?
good. And
Well, and it made me, it
is this a
reminded
one
me,
bed trope
that's
almost?
what I was like, is this a one bed trope? Could we, like, get
Is
there?
there
We don't.
joining rooms?
That was my other thing because it made me think of A Shadow in the Ember, where there is only a door that separates them. So I was just like, ooh,
Let's see what
I
goes
see what you
here.
did
Yeah.
there, Emily Henry. I
Uh-huh.
see what you did.
Yep. But the next morning, Alice runs into Captain Cecil again at the coffee shop this time and shares that she's a writer. So he's assuming, oh, she's here to write about the town, which he's like super excited about. He's like, oh, yeah, this would be great. Like, here's my business card in case you need anything while you're in town. And at first, you're like, okay, it's not surprising for someone in a small town to be like so kind and like really nice and outgoing and like want to chat. We didn't think twice about it when we first read it. And then now looking back, you're like, oh, I see what you did there. But you know what? I also respect him. He is respecting the boundaries here and he's
Yes.
letting the people figure it out and come to him when the time is right. And you're
Yes.
just like, oh my God. So we
I
see
feel like
Alice.
he's the
Yeah.
person that like is like, well, if you ask the right questions, I will answer it. Like that's like the sense he gave me, like, I will tell you what you need to know, but you have to ask the question. And I'm just like,
Yes.
I don't know what the questions are.
Yeah, you're like, I don't, you need to tell me what my questions are so I can ask them. Yeah, exactly. But then we see Alice here get a green tea and croissant for Hayden and, you know, a little olive branch, if you will. She gets it for him in case he happens to stop by the coffee shop again after his run, but she leaves it at his hotel room front door, but doesn't see him anywhere, and just like, okay, I'm just gonna like leave this here. It's fine. And he doesn't seem to pick it up for like a couple of hours. She's like, is something wrong? Is he okay? Like he should have been back by his like run by now. And she's clearly having like an anxiety moment about this because she apparently has had some history with her sister in the past, not being like in the best of health. And she's also probably listening to like too many crime podcasts, honestly, or being like, oh my God, what if he slipped and fell in the shower and died and blah, blah, blah. Like, what if he's duct taped to a chair? But she bangs on his door like very aggressively and he just answers it. He was in the shower and he's just holding a little towel around him and you're like, hello, don't mind if I do. He looks
Is the
good.
towel gonna slip?
Is
It
it gonna
doesn't.
slip off? It doesn't slip off, which is so annoying. But he's just like, what do you want? And she's like, I brought you something. He's like, cool, thanks, whatever. Um, but he's also like, I don't I don't know what to do with this. Like, we're not friends. But, you know, it's an offering, like we said. So he takes it, he's like, thanks. And then later that night, Alice is woken by a fire alarm and they all have to get out of the hotel. And it's really uncomfortable at this moment because a drunk guy comes up to her and starts hitting on her and giving like super major creepy vibes. And then Hayden has also been evacuated and like shows up and quickly acts like he's there with her, like puts his arm around her waist. And he's just like, yeah, this is my girl. Like, back off, dude. Kudos to him for helping a girl out. And like, you should always kind of do that if you see somebody given the, oh my God, who is this creeper vibe? So he's being very protective. And that honestly only gets stronger as the book goes on. It's so cute to see. Like, he like comes out of his grumpy shell and he's like, I'm okay.
He's like a turtle, like sticks his head out a little bit, like, I am a human. I
Yes.
can have feelings. Whoop, back
Yes.
in.
Oh, no, back in. Yes, exactly. So, since that fire alarm process is likely going to take an hour, Hayden's like, let's not sit out here in the cold in the middle of the night. Like, let's go grab breakfast at this place I know, Ray's Diner, which is like 25 minutes away. So, she's like, all right, sure, whatever. They go in their pajamas. And during their breakfast, we learn a little bit more about each of them. So, we learn very specifically that Hayden prefers the corner booth, kind of like Al Pacino in a way, so he can see everything going on in the restaurant. He's like, it's the most protected seat. You can see every entrance, every exit. Again, very Al Pacino. It's like, are you in the mafia? Is somebody gonna come kill
Right?
you? Like, are you
Like,
okay?
do you have to hide from people? Like, what is going on? Do you have an ex-girlfriend you have to be leery of? Like, what?
Right? Or blink twice if you're in the witness protection program. Like, are you okay?
My other thought was like, do you have stomach problems? Do you need to be close to the bathroom? Like, what is going on?
Yeah, right. Do you have IBS, buddy? Because, we can relate. So he prefers a private life, is what he says, because his dad was the mayor of a small town in Indiana. Hey.
Hey.
And so he just kind of felt like he always had to be perfect all the time. So he's like very private, not super outgoing for that reason. He's also felt like he couldn't live up to his parents' standards, which is so sad. Especially considering, I guess, he has a brother who's like the local pediatrician, and like and then like his brother's wife is like the head of the school boards. They're like, literally keeping up with Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, or what's it that thing called?
Joneses are the perfects.
This,
I mean,
yeah, just
yeah.
like they're perfect, and he's just like, I can't do this. This is too much. And then we learn about Alice's sister, and she makes a joke like, oh, like, they wish you were in the Peace Corps. Funny thing about that, though, my sister actually is in the Peace Corps. And she's like, oh, okay, cool.
Great.
But she can like empathize. She's like, yeah, like my mom thinks my sister's life is way more important and like impressive, and that me writing like celebrity gossip stuff in her eyes is like not as worthwhile of a career. So her mom is not supportive of her, but Alice just doesn't like force the issue. She's like, whatever, I can't change her. It is what it is. And at that point, also, we hear Hayden's very much like putting the boundary up of them talking about Margaret. He's like, we can maybe be friends, but we are not going to talk about work. We're not going to talk about Margaret at all whatsoever. Which I can imagine as Alice, she's just like, but what about
But like, question.
this? Yeah.
But I heard. But
It's like maybe they had a code word, like, so Voldemort told me this, she who
that's
shall not be named.
that's
Yeah.
how I felt like she, like, throughout the entire book. That's what I felt like she was doing. So, like, I feel like this is happening. Do you? And he's like, we're not going to talk about her. But if we did, but we're
It's
not
like,
going to. But if we did,
yes. Was this the same feeling you got when this topic came up?
based
He's
on
like,
your
I don't
facial
know.
expression, I think the answer is yes.
And he's just like,
Turtle, back in.
back in the shell. Yeah. So,
That is really the impression I had of him throughout this book. Is like every time it's like two steps forward, like one step forward, two steps back in his progress. Okay, so we
yeah.
get Alice's first interview with Margaret, and I just thought it's like her first day of school. Like she is so freaking excited. Like she probably spent all this time picking out her outfit. She's got like all of her supplies because it's like in her mind her dream job, and she is overflowing with excitement that she tells Margaret just as much. Which, no pressure, it'll be fine. And that's also when we start to learn like Alice kind of went into the rabbit hole of the internet to find Margaret. Because that's the like
Stalker status.
she went stalker status. She was down the Reddit trails. She got an email. She looked into it. She called people. And hey, like, let's be honest. That's what friends are for.
Yes.
I can't say that I've not done that to help friends out when they're dating a new guy or,
It's like,
Whatevs.
here, watch me find him. I'm the FBI. And I like go on
Correct.
Facebook and I'm like, I found his cousin's ex-girlfriend's little brother, blah, 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 blah. And this
Also,
says
did
that
you
they
know he liked this photo? And why this is his Reddit name? Don't you think that's odd? Why is his email this? Why do you know all this information? It's not important. Do
it's not
you?
important. It's like here are his last known addresses for the past 5 years.
Why
No
are
big
you
deal.
checking the court cases to see if he's a criminal? Don't you do
Yes.
that?
Doing a
It's
background check.
online.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
So Alice basically does that to Margaret.
Which to Margaret, and it works. So, and then we learned that like Alice left her this like her second voicemail, and basically that was what supposedly convinced Margaret to meet with her, which is a big lie. That's not
Yeah.
why Margaret met with her, but that's what we think at this point. And it turns out that Alice's dad gave her a love for Cosmo's music, which was Margaret's husband, and this is
Hence
like one
the
of my favorite
cosmic.
parts. Connection.
Mm-hmm.
And she supposedly cried when she found out he died when she was 7, even though he died 30 years before. Her parents just happened to tell her that because she wanted to invite him to her 7th birthday party. And this reminded me of so my first concert ever was Conway Twitty in the 80s. I was like probably 7, just to be really clear. Conway Twitty was not my favorite person when I was in elementary school. He was my mom's,
Yeah. Yeah.
but she went and took me for my birthday. And that's what I thought of. I was like, oh, you've developed a love for like a 7-year-old would not have a love for Cosmo's music, who's been dead for 30 years
Yeah.
at 7, if it was not for her
Yeah.
parents. So it reminded me of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or like, like when I found out like that like Frank Sinatra had died. And I was
Yes.
like, he died before I was ever born. But I was like, I'm so sad. I'll never see him in concert. But I was not 7 when that happened, but still,
Yeah.
one of those. Yeah.
All right, so let's dive in what we learned on this first interview with Margaret. And there's so much that we learned that like kind of is probably like little breadcrumbs for like the bigger story that's happening. So supposedly the Eyes family is cursed, or that's what everyone says, which felt like very Kennedy vibes to me. Her family was one of the first to figure out like what news isn't what sells, it's the headline. And so basically invented the concept of clickbaits before they were even a thing. I mean, whoever did invent that, ugh,
So rude.
so rude. You're part of the problem with what's wrong with
You're
the
the
world
problem.
today.
Yeah.
Because people do not read, except for headlines that are not accurate to what is actually going on. But moving on. This book is not very political, so we're not going to go there like some of our others. But anyways, so Lawrence Richard Eyes, which is Margaret's great-grandfather, also could have done with a nice genealogy chart at some point in this book, would have been super helpful. He grew up in extreme poverty, had like 10 siblings. His little brother dies due to frostbite, and then he feels responsible. And so he's like, I need to make money. And so he goes to California to mine. So this is kind of like when the gold rush is happening. And he is that person that, like, no matter how much money he makes, he always wants more. And I think we all probably know people like that. So, and then he lies to his partner Thomas because they're looking at some land in Nevada, and he's like, "Yeah, I don't think it's like worth buying." And then he goes and buys it himself, which also sounds like people we may have met in life before. And he leads to a really large strike of silver ore, and then he ends up buying as a result the local inn because he's like, more people are going to come here, they're going to need a place to stay. So he's kind of like a little bit of a genius in terms of like he knows where to invest money and then what to do after he does that into something next where they'll make it like basically how to print his own money.
He's a good businessman in that sense.
He's very much so. But Alice is like, why are we talking about this? Like, why are we starting this story back in the late 1800s? And Margaret's like, well, my family never really even talked about him. So once again, why are we doing this? And she's like, well, all this information was learned from like these old journals that were given to her grandfather and then her sister Laura. And you're just like, when I was reading this, I'm like, what is the point of this? Which it makes sense because like her grandfather, the journals, Laura are a big part of the story later. And then we get kind of like what's Margaret's first, not lie, but like inconsistency or questionable statement. And she mentions like this hotel, the hotel was named the Ebener, and she's only been there once before her parents divorced. And it's kind of like this, you're like, okay, that's weird, but no big deal. Yeah. Sure, moving on. And then she said, I have to start with this portion of the story because that's where it really began for the Ives family. And I'm like, okay, like I guess that makes sense, but like, do people want to read about that in a biography about you? Like maybe for like a chapter? I don't know. And then Alice is starting to realize, like a good journalist or writer would, like Margaret's being very guarded. Let me turn off the tape recorder and see if that'll help her share more. And it does a little bit. She opens up about how Lawrence bought his first newspaper because Thomas was pissed about being kept out of the Nevada mine deal and was going to tell the story to a California paper. And I'm like, oh, so he bought it to like keep that like the story out of the news. No, he gave zero fucks about that. He realized that the newspaper was paying Thomas a certain amount of money, and then he was like, oh, I could make money in the news. And I'm like, touche, like, way to go, Lawrence. So he invests his money, and then like he's like, I'll invest and watch it grow. And then we get this like weird statement from Margaret. At least I thought it was weird. She was like, well, before Lawrence died, he rambled about three things: apologizing to the ghost of his brother who died, which isn't like very weird, like in terms of like people do like think other people that have died before them are in the room before they die. That's, you hear that a lot. And then he's arguing with Thomas, who I also assume was dead at this point. And then like Margaret doesn't mention the third. She's like, it'll have to wait for another time. And I'm like, okay, when you say that, now I know it's important. I need to know what it is.
Yeah.
Like you can't tell me things like that are like, I'll let you know later. That's like saying I have a surprise for you. I
Yeah.
love surprises when I have zero idea that a surprise is coming. But if you tell me a surprise is coming, I will do all of the crazy research. I will figure it out. You can't drop those hints like I need to know.
I'll go looking through all the stuff. Be like, where is it? Where's my
Correct.
surprise? What is it? Is it under the couch? Is it in the closet? I don't know. I want to find it.
If you want to give me a surprise or you want me to not know information, you need to not tell me anything about said information or how it's important, or you'll tell me later. And you need to not tell me a surprise is ever coming
Yeah.
or do
Yeah.
anything bizarre that would make me indicate that a surprise is coming.
Yeah. And then later that day, Alice continues to, research the Ives family based on what she's learned from Margaret. Starts doing a little fact checking like every good writer would. And here's when she starts to notice that little discrepancy between what Margaret called the hotel, the Ebner, and what it had actually been named during the time period when the Ives family owned it. So back then it was called the Nicolette. And didn't think too much about this at first when we read it. We're just like, all right, she's using the current name, the hotel. But it definitely has significantly deeper meaning later. And you're like, when you find out, you're like, oh my God, mind blown. Like,
Yes.
what? So that's like a little like nugget that we're like, okay, is this gonna be important later? I don't know, but I'll just like log it away. And so later we get to see the on again and off again booty call relationship that Alice has with this guy, Theo, which seriously reminded me of a guy that one of my friends is like seeing. And I'm like, can you not? Can you just not? Don't text it back. Just
Don't
because he's
block
like
his number.
yeah, like, and he's the type of guy that like wants Alice to want him when it's convenient for him, but like he won't put forth any effort in the rest of the time. He apparently like never even asks her out, but like makes comments about being available, so like she has to be the one to do the asking. Such a power play, and like so we just immediately dislike him. Like we're just like, dude, like no, we don't need you, but be gone. We don't need you. And Alice then goes to the rum room for dinner, which I'm like, what are these places? Like,
They're very interesting. Like that, they're such like Florida, Georgia Beach, like town restaurant names. Because I'm like the fishbowl, the rum room. I mean, wouldn't you want to go there on vacation? Because like, what the
I
fuck
mean, I
is this
do.
place?
I do want to go. I want to go find out. Like, I want to Google, like, is there a rum room? I'm probably gonna find something else, but So she goes, and who does she see in the back corner table? It's our fun little grumpy boy Hayden, just brooding over his computer. And he of course like sees her, and he's like, "Do you want to join me at my table?" And like we're shocked, honestly. We're like, "What? You're reaching out? You're being a gentleman? Wow." But she's assuming like, okay, he's being polite, like whatever. And he's like, "I don't do anything, just be polite." He's like, "If I'm inviting you, like I'm generally inviting you." And you're like, "Oh, okay." Okay, your heart's showing there a little bit, buddy, but good for you.
I also thought it
So,
might be a trap at some point
right?
because I was just like, romantasy has gotten me to think like everything's a trap or a trick. So I'm like, what
I
kind of?
trust no one.
I trust no one. I was like, why is he inviting her over? That seems out of his character.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But it's a good conversation, and we learn a little bit more about Hayden, which is nice. And also we find out a bit more about kind of like what's going on with Margaret, maybe. So Alice pretty much tells him, she's like, I think Margaret's lying to me. But Hayden's very much like, I'm not talking about this. We're not talking anything related to Margaret. And Alice is like, maybe Margaret lied to him too. So she's like trying to pry that out of him. And he's like, no, I'm not telling you anything. Which I respect. I'm like, okay, keeping a good boundary. That's good. And then he drops this bomb that he's like, I never go out with journalists. And it's like, what do you mean? Have you gone out
What
with
do you
one
mean?
before? Is
What
there a
happened?
precedent? Yeah, like
Tell
what's
me.
happened? I
This
want
is
to
what
know.
I mean. You say things
Yeah,
like that, and I need to know why. I need to know what
I
the
need to know.
backstory is. Now,
Need to know. Yes. So, and then Hayden, he does kind of imply that he's like skeptical a bit about what's going on with Margaret. He's like, I don't know, like maybe she has memory problems. But like he's really quick to point out that he worries about that now with everyone, given his experience with a previous a client or a topic that he's done a book on, this guy Len, who like had dementia, and like Hayden literally spent multiple years with this guy writing this book at the end of his life, and so now he's just like hypersensitive to it pretty much. Um, but then we also like pick up really, really fast that Alice is super attracted to Hayden. Like there's even this like awkward moment where it's like their legs are just like too long to be under the same table, and they keep like brushing each other, and she's like, oh, his leg is like by my thigh. And you're like, yeah, you're turned on by him. You like him. And also, you're screwed, honey. At least she wants to be. Yeah. And then we
just
find
wait a
out,
while.
it was been a while. We find out Alice's older sister, who the one who's in the Peace Corps, has actually had 14 heart surgeries when she was younger, but she's fine now. She's totally fine. But because of that, like she has a lot of anxiety over like her sister's health and like other people's health, which okay, makes sense. Her parents were super eccentric. I mean, like we're talking like they lived on a farming commune at one point and like chained themselves to trees, major hippies. Which when we go to visit her mom later, we're like, oh, this tracks. That makes sense. She's still pretty much the same. And Hayden is a super big gentleman. So after their dinner, he walks her back to her rental house, which, such a sweet guy. And also makes us all suspect that he's attracted to Alice too, which he definitely is because he makes him move and kisses her. And you're like, buddy, you said you don't date journalists. What are you doing?
What are
He
you
can't
doing?
help himself. He can't help himself. He has to do it. And she's like, do you want to come inside? And he's like, no, no, I shouldn't have done that. I should have given the wrong idea. That I was interested in something. Like, I'm not interested. She's like, ouch. Like, okay, got it. And he's just like, I refuse to hook up with someone when I'm going to take your job away. And she's like, asshole. Like,
Right?
dude, like, come on. But we do find out later, like, what drives that behavior. And yeah, he's infuriating at this point in the book, but it feels like a very classic case of like mind fucking. Then we'll see it, too often in books and in real life. And we're just like, could you not? Could you
Should
just
not.
not? Like, let's be real. Let's be honest. Remember when you said you don't do anything to be polite? Don't do anything to mind fuck. Like,
Correct.
same rules
No
should
mind
apply.
fucking
Yeah.
in life and in books, please.
Yeah. Please.
I'd rather take bad communication tropes than mind fucking tropes.
Yeah, exactly.
That should be a trigger warning. This book has mind fucking in it.
Yeah. But not because you're mod unit.
No, that's different, or not because you were in the nethers.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so Alice's next interview with Margaret, we learn a lot more. So Lawrence married this girl named Amelia, even though her father was against it. And he basically did it to get more standing in his life. He used his papers to say a bunch of flattering things about the family to get her father on his side after they eloped. So he's always like looking out for the best deal is the best way I can describe it. Don't know what else to say about that. And then his Margaret's grandfather, Gerald, is the one who actually built like the House of Ives that the world knows today. And Margaret saw him as the person who set every moment of her life into motion. I'm just like, oh, okay, that's a lot. When she says that, I'm like, I mean, your grandfather? I don't understand that. But it makes sense like at the very end. But at this point, I'm just like, that's weird. So Gerald could never live up to his father's standards, and he had like a really strict childhood compared to his sister Gigi, and that feels very similar to kind of like what Hayden and Alice both went through, and other people I think can definitely relate to. And he was given a newspaper by his father, and he took like big swings to get his father's attention. He was always trying to like prove that he was, I think, worthy. And he focused on hiring great talent, attacking corruption, pointing out hypocrisy, like all the things that journalism, like back in the day, used to be known for before what is on the news today. Um,
No fake news.
no fake news allowed.
No.
That's all I'm gonna say. So he was super successful with newspapers in California, but he struggled in New York because people there didn't trust him, which kind of makes sense if you know anything about the East Coast. And then he married this girl named Rosalind Goodlet by convincing her father to make an alliance, which results in another arranged marriage. And I'm just like, what?
I mean, her father was a senator, so you're like, okay,
Like,
you
I
get
kind of,
influence there. But also, like, we
but
need to do arranged marriages. Like,
also, why do we call them alliances?
yeah.
All right, this is
Are we
not
in
like we're
medieval
not
times?
bartering women. Like, what the hell is going on?
Is this Survivor?
Oh,
We need to make an alliance. Not get
oh
voted
my
off the
God.
island.
Not to like to be successful in New York, I made an alliance. You got
Honestly,
my
it's probably
rice.
not a bad tactic in New York.
It probably isn't.
Probably not,
So
yeah.
so Rosaline just like doesn't love Jared. Gerald, like Gerald. What are we calling
Gerald.
him?
Gerald? Gerald.
Gerald. Okay.
Yeah, we'll go with
But
that.
they were like good I mean, how could she love him? She was like basically forced to marry him by her dad.
Yeah.
So
So
they're good
lame.
partners. They have two kids together, Frederick and Francine, and he was determined to be a good father, both of them, unlike what he experienced growing up. And he was like early on. So,
Yeah.
which I think is like really important. He eventually becomes this like California state senator. He wants to go to the White House, but like the caucus never chooses him as a presidential candidate. And when his father dies, the best way I could describe this is not what the book says, but Gerald has a midlife crisis. Like that's what's going on. He's just like, I've got to get out of here. And so he doesn't go far. He goes from San Francisco to Hollywood. And on his first night there, he meets this woman named Nina, and they fall madly in love, or lust, or both. A little bit of both, probably.
It's a chaotic love.
It's a chaotic love. That,
Mhm.
yes, it's a chaotic, probably toxic love.
Toxic
Oh,
affair, you
toxic
know.
affair that lasts for a while.
Yeah.
And, why not buy a film studio and make Nina, who's like a struggling actress, a star? Sounds like a great idea. And then he builds like this massive estate that is talked about throughout the book.
See,
But
that's what made me think of like a Tori Spelling kind of a thing, where
like
it's
the
like,
Spelling Mansion.
yeah, huge mansion. You have your own like studio because Aaron Spelling had like a bunch of stuff. So just reminded me of that scenario, but like in the 1930s, 40s.
Yes.
So
But like on the beach too.
old Hollywood.
Old,
Yeah.
very old Hollywood.
Mhm.
So even though like he's married, keep in mind, still married, having
Yeah.
an affair with Nina, he's also having an affair with on both of those women with other women.
Yeah. It's like you're cheating on your wife and on your mistress.
Correct. That's a
You're just a
lot.
womanizer.
You're just a womanizer. There's a song about that. And they'd have like these massive like fights where they would throw things, very toxic relationship. And then she supposedly gets sick and disappears for a couple of years, which isn't the real story. I assume that she just got sick and like had cancer or had something that like they didn't want to make public to hurt her acting career. And then supposedly she falls in love with her doctor during her illness. And I'm like, that's also very bizarre, right? And at the time, then he reconnects with his sister Gigi, whose husband died, and and she discovered she was pregnant. So he moves like Gigi and her daughter Ruth back to his California estate. I'm like, that's kind of weird, but okay.
Yeah.
I literally didn't think twice of it. I was just like,
I was
okay,
a
cool.
bit suspect about Nina, and I'm like, she just disappears for a
Here.
few years. And I was like, that's like literally the telltale sign that someone's like pregnant and is trying to like get rid of it. Like they're gonna go to Switzerland for a few months and then come back and just be a little fat. And you're like, but what happened?
But what
But 2
happened?
years. For 2 years, you're like, well, maybe not. I
Maybe.
don't know.
Or she had like a mental breakdown. Like I thought, because like right back then, like mental health, well, even until recently, I feel like mental health was not talked about. It was like, well, maybe she had some sort of like mental health condition and needed to get like treatment or whatever. So then what's weird is so we have like Gerald, Gigi, and Ruth living in the California state. And then he moves back his wife, who he's still married to, and his two kids who are in their 20s and still living at home,
Yeah.
back
Well,
into
because
the
they're
estate.
mega rich. They don't have to
I
move. They
mean,
don't have to
they
live
don't
near
have to
us.
go. But I'm also like, I'm surprised you've not been arranged marriage by now,
True.
like for an alliance. So he can't like, I mean, he's been gone. So he can't fix
Yeah.
his relationship with his wife. He doesn't really try to, or his kids. So he puts all this attention on Ruth instead. And I'm like, well, that's suspicious.
Yeah. You're like, oh, so you're gonna pretend she's your kid, like live vicariously with like what you could have been as a father with your niece now?
Correct.
Like,
Which kind of
hmm.
made, like at the time I was like, it kind of makes sense though, because like according to the story we're being told, like her dad is dead. And so I could see like he wants to play that
Just
father figure role.
yeah, yeah.
But I was also like, hmm. And then Margaret says like a really weird kind of comment that she's decided to write this book because she made a promise to someone and they died before she could take it back. And I'm like,
That's so
that
savage.
that's so savage. I was like, so on their deathbed, if you could have, you've been like, and I take it back. And I'm just like,
You're like, never
what?
mind.
Never
Yeah, it's
mind.
like who'd you make a promise to? Was it Cosmo? Was it your mom and dad? Was it your
Dad,
sister? Like, is your sister
like
still
who?
alive? I don't know.
Like, we don't know at this point.
Yeah.
And we learned that like no one else besides Jody and Margaret ever go to Margaret's house. And I'm like, okay, like that's not like super odd. Um, and Jody handles everything for Margaret. So I thought for a majority of the book that she was Margaret's employee. Like
Yeah, because
she was
she
kind
has
of
like a
like,
German accent, right?
yeah, and
They
like
said like she's
she,
German.
right. And so, and she's like there and she's like, doing what I would say like kind of like almost like a personal assistant type of task all the time. So I was like, oh, she must just work for her.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Didn't think anything of it.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
guess that wasn't the case. So then Theo comes back into the picture, does his typical a-hole thing where he's insinuating he's available that weekend to get Alice to go out with him and hang out, which she inevitably does. She's like, okay, yeah, like I'm free too. And he says, okay, I'll drive down. And like they're all super excited about it. She's like, okay, cool. Meanwhile, she gets invited to Cecil's birthday party at the Fishbowl. Hey, hey, it's a big party there. And decides to bring Theo to it. And she also runs into Hayden at the coffee shop, of course, because it's a small town. And they have a super awkward conversation with him about how Margaret canceled on her. And again, he's like, I'm not telling you anything that happens with me and Margaret. And then he's like, but you know what? I want to be friends. What are you doing tonight? And she's like, oh, I got a hot date at the Fishbowl. Can you imagine saying that to somebody? I got a hot date at the Fishbowl. Woo!
Right. And
Just
like
like,
being serious about it.
yeah. And you're like, oh no. So they're at the Fishbowl. Literally to no one's surprise, Theo is running late. And he's like, I'll just meet you there. You're like, okay. 100% knew you're like, you're going to stand her up. Like, don't say you're going to meet you. It just don't.
Uh,
Say what you mean and mean what you say. But yeah, we just know like he's not coming.
it's
It's
not
gonna be
coming,
bad.
girl.
Yeah. So we're at the Fishbowl. Hayden's there, and seems to because he just there's nothing else to do, and he's just there. They would not come together, but he seems to think like your date isn't real based on like some of the comments he makes, and again like no one's there. But then to make it worse, Theo calls to cancel because the drive wouldn't be worth it. So Alice
So
isn't worth it
angry.
to you? Like, oh my God. Like, know your worth, girl. Come on. What what made me so mad was she's like, okay, well, I mean, like, how far out are you? And he's like, I haven't left. And it's like,
Like I'm sitting here at the restaurant, asshole.
so when you said you would just meet me there, you already knew you were gonna be running late and your drive is 3 hours away. Like, you should just cancel. Like, don't leave my hopes up. Like, who are you really fucking at this point? Like, what are you really doing?
I was
You're
gonna
doing
say a
something
really
else.
inappropriate thing, which was like his hand, but
No,
which
based
I
on
just did.
Theo, based on Theo, he's got somebody else's hand or mouth or whatever.
Or something else.
There's something else. He's a player, so he's just playing the game. And whichever game is easier for him to get, that doesn't mean he has to drive 3 hours, you know. So she goes to leave the restaurant. She's really pissed off. Hayden follows her out, worried like, is something wrong? And she's just yelling at him for kissing her and shutting her down, trying to ruin her date. Like, you're just trying to humiliate me. Like, how dare you? But it turns out, like, Hayden thought she had invited him to the fishbowl and that she was just joking about the date. And it's like, what? No. And then we get this little bomb here. Hayden tells Alice that Margaret reached out to him, which immediately sends Alice into panic because, like, she is now thinking, oh my God, he chose you. Like, I had to hunt her down and she just reaches out to you. Like, clearly she wants to do this book with you and not me. And he admits then that he's like, I just didn't feel right kissing you when you didn't know the whole truth. And he's like, I kind of be respectful. And you're like,
I mean,
okay,
okay.
well, I understand, but like, don't kiss a girl and then say like, I'm not doing this. Like, we, come on. Clearly, this girl has a bad track record with guys making her feel worthy, and it's like, don't be one of
You're
those
not
guys.
helping Hayden at this point.
Yeah, you're not helping because then he kisses her again, and it gets a little handsy. And you're like, please, please. Doesn't go any further. And you're like, oh, damn
Turtle.
it. Ugh. He goes back. He doesn't admit he's attracted to her. I'm like, well, I mean, clearly. But then he also says, by the way, I think Margaret's lying to me too. It's like, ooh, ooh, what's going on?
Which I feel like is kind of like this weird foreplay for him, where
Yeah.
he's like, I can't, like, I gotta stop. I mean, I do find you pretty. Margaret lies to me too. And he's out. And I'm just like,
Bye.
oh, that's not helping.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So during the next interview, we learned there are definitely two NDAs. So whatever Margaret tells Alice, she can't tell Hayden, which is what we thought earlier. And Margaret thinks that she can trust Alice because Alice knew her location for months and like no one else found her. But she doesn't know
Mm-hmm.
if she can trust Hayden. And Alice is like, no, you can trust Hayden. And I'm like, girl, you do not know him very well. You've
Yeah,
met
I
him
don't
for
know.
like 3 or 4 times. None of those times, while some of them have been maybe mutually beneficial, um, or a little steamy, have like, how do you know you can trust him? Besides like
Yeah,
gut
like,
feel.
yeah, it's like he hasn't given you anything to know you can trust him yet. Exactly.
Right. But she just like commits to it. So
She's
then we learn
optimistic.
she is very optimistic, glass half full. So Gerald renamed the N to the Nicolette, which is represents in their family the one it was all for. And I'm like, huh, that's interesting. And I think like that's kind of like one of the major themes, the one who it's all for throughout the rest of the book. And then we learn the third thing finally that Lawrence said when he died was that was all for Nicolette, who is his sister. So his little sister that he was doing this for. So in the Ives family, Nicolette is that person. So the only one you would give it all up for. And Ruth's middle name was Nicolette too. And then we learned that Ruth wasn't Gigi's daughter, she was Nina and Gerald's daughter. Dun dun dun.
And you're like,
Oh,
what?
what? Okay.
Then, yeah, you're like, okay, the hotel is named the Nicolette because of the sister. He then names from the great grandfather. And then her
Yes.
grandfather names her aunt,
His daughter.
technically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's his aunt? Middle name, Ruth. It's just like, it's all, so you're like, okay, Nicolette's a big deal. That's a big name. Like, it's a
Yes.
family name. Oh.
A special family name. And then we learned that the reason they split up wasn't because they weren't in love with each other or his womanizing ways. It was because apparently while affairs are okay, having a baby from an affair not okay.
Baby born out
So
of wedlock.
no.
Oh,
Sleeping around,
bad.
fine. Apparently. So they don't want Ruth to suffer the consequences, so they decide to split up and like Gerald will raise Ruth as his niece. And they never tell this girl the truth. And they're going to tell her on this weekend that was like Margaret's birthday, I think like 16th birthday party or
Yeah.
something. And she ends up dying with her husband in a plane crash, which also felt very like JFK
Kennedy.
Jr. Kennedy
Mhm.
to me. And I was just like, and she never knows.
She never knew. What threw me, or what kind of made me suspicious about the whole Ruth baby maybe being the daughter, was when Nina was there at the wedding.
Yes.
Like they talk about like, oh, Nina was there at Ruth's wedding. And it's like,
Why?
why? Why would your ex-lover, who is now married to someone else, like be
Be
at
there.
your niece's wedding? That doesn't track unless she's related, unless she's the mother.
But then I
I
also
had,
thought like sometimes rich people invite a lot of people to weddings.
I mean,
And I
that's
was
true.
like,
She's
was
still a
there like
celebrity. Yeah.
yeah, is there just like, is this what you do? And was she still like an actress for Royal Pictures? Like, did he feel like obligated? I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe he just invited everybody, you know. Yeah. I don't
So,
know.
so then Alice goes in like typical like sleuthing fashion to go find some of Margaret's art that's like being sold under another name. And the first piece she looks at, she's like, oh, this is beautiful. And it's like thousands of dollars. She's like,
Yeah.
okay, moving on. Moving
Yeah.
on. We've all been there when you're like in an art gallery, like, oh my God, I love this. How much is it? Okay, that's outside my price range. Can we go to something
Yes.
smaller? And
Yes.
then she finds this like really small piece that she buys, and on the back of it, handwritten is Nicolette, which I'm like, okay, that's interesting.
Yes.
And then we see this really cute interact, like that's the way I would describe it, interaction between Hayden and Alice, where like he leaves her a drink with the word like friends written on it on her doorstep. And then she like follows back by dropping off a green tea outside of his hotel room door with her phone number on it. So I'm like, oh, that's kind of like that. It felt very like middle school to me.
Yeah. Check
Like
yes,
I,
check no. Yeah.
yes, or like I put something in your locker. I put something like outside your locker, or wrote you like slipped a note into your locker.
It's so cute.
So super cute.
Yeah. So during the next interview with Margaret, we learn a couple of other things now. So her father, who was Frederick, the son of Gerald, who, grew up in San Francisco and then got forced down to Hollywood. Her father, Frederick, was a super jealous man of everyone and everything throughout his entire life. Gee, I wonder why. Um, and then his sister, Francine, was apparently like super successful at this Hearth and Home journal. And she like really worked hard and like was basically everything that Gerald, I think, wanted him to be, but like didn't. Like she like rose up to the occasion, like was a badass CEO kind of a lady. And Freddie's like, I'm just gonna do as little work as possible at Royal Pictures, the film company my daddy bought, and just let me sit in the corner office. Like
I
did not
play
yeah,
executive.
yeah, he didn't do anything. It's like the show Succession at that point, and he's just like Roman. He's just like, I'm here. Like, I'm here. What do you want me to do? Whatever. I'm just gonna fuck around. So his father, would try to then push off directors and writers and actors that he didn't really care about and like didn't really want to work with. He would just push him off to Freddie and be like, okay, you deal with them. You deal with these people. Slash, maybe you'll work. I don't know. And so all of a sudden, this woman, Doris Bernhardt, like walks in through the door. She is a badass lady. She is a female director, which he's like, we have female directors? Like, women can't do anything. What are you talking about? And she's just like letting him know what's up. And he's just like, I know nothing about you, even though like you've technically worked for me, and whoops. And then he realizes that her new contract was super insulting. And he's like, yeah, he's like, this is so dumb. Like, he's like, I'll try and speak to my father about it, but I suggest like nothing's going to happen because like you're a woman and we need more from you than this. And, basically like you need us more than we need you. And so we're not going to do anything. And she's like, F that. Like, I'm going to go get a new contract with somebody else at the competing studio MGM. And obviously like Freddie's like really impressed with her. He's like, yeah, that's awesome. You do that. He sends her flowers. And we actually learned a funny thing that she hates cut flowers because they make her sad, which is something we learned about Margaret earlier in the book too, when Alice brings her flowers. And Jody says, oh, she doesn't like cut flowers, which is funny because then Alice is like, well, then just kidding. These are for you. So it's really
She
sweet.
does like wine though.
She does like wine. Yeah. So basically, we kind of learned that like Margaret and her mother are very similar in that sense. But eventually, Doris and Freddie start talking like on a regular basis, and they become friends. They take long walks together. It's like super sweet. And after like barely 11 months, he's like, "We should get married because you're my favorite person in the world." Like, even though we never kissed, never had sex. And she's like, "Oh, okay, I guess so." So they get married, and very quickly have Margaret. Well, actually, no, she was pregnant with Margaret, and that's how that progressed. Um, and then they have a daughter, Laura, Margaret's little sister. And Margaret spent every single moment with her mom and her sister for like the first few years. Like Doris was a typical stay-at-home mom, gave up her job, was home. But when her mother went back to work, the fight between her and Freddie like really started to get going, which is really sad to see. You're like, you want to have your cake and eat it too, but it's so hard. So basically, Margaret's mom and her dad start fighting the second that her mom goes back to work. And you're like, that doesn't bode well. That's not good. So we learned that bit about Margaret there. And then Alice and Hayden decide to meet up at dinner. but leading up to that, he literally just like texts her randomly and she's like, hello. And he texts her hello and she's like, hi. Like, I'm assuming this must be him. And like, he kind of like plays like, who is this? And she's like, oh, we had all that romantic time and you forget about me. It's like cute little banter they have. So they're just like, all right, let's meet up and have dinner. So they meet up and have dinner, have each other's numbers now, have a nice evening together talking about life, trying not to talk about Margaret at all, but that's hard to do. Voldemort. They take a little walk. He holds her hand, which isn't something most friends would do unless you're like hoping
Right?
you're more than friends. And then, of course, as more than friends would do, there's some slight grinding all up into each other until Hayden's like, we need to stop. I can't do this. I gotta stop. But you're just like, no, please don't
No,
stop.
please
Please
don't.
keep
You're
going.
adults.
Yeah, seriously. Like,
Like, what
they're
is this,
consenting
middle
adults,
school?
right? Well, I mean, yeah, because they're like friends, not friends. Who is
Not
this?
friends.
Yeah,
Yeah, it felt very like amateur or like junior in terms of clearly both of
yeah,
them have not been in good relationships.
clearly.
So then we get another outing of Hayden and Alice together, and it's starting to become clear that like there's something serious happening between the two of them, even though like they both kind of refuse to admit it. They go off to dinner, they end up on the beach, they talk about their lives, like his in New York, hers in LA, careers. Hayden finally tells us the story about how he competed with a girlfriend for a job, which is why he's like reluctant to pursue anything with Alice because he got the promotion, his girlfriend didn't, she resented him for it. And then like I'm like, okay, we're on the beach, they're like laying close to each other, and then it starts to get hot and steamy. And Hayden gets very handsy. Hayden is a handsy guy. And then he like stops again before it goes too far. And I'm just like, for the love, turtle. Stick your
Seriously.
like seriously, I need you to stop sticking your head back in. Like, oh
I
my
need you to
God.
stick something else out
That's it.
and into
Yes.
someone. So does
Correct.
she. She's like, stick it in me. Let's go. Like
Please.
literally, like has his hand like on top of hers, like going down her pants. I'm like, come on, just
Come
go,
on, we're
just
close.
have a little sex on the beach. There's a drink named after that. It's probably really popular at what that place called?
Fishbowl. The
Fishbowl.
rum
Yeah,
room.
at the rum room. Yep. Mhm.
But stops again. And Alice is left hot and bothered. We're left hot and bothered. And then he's like, do you want to go out the next night? I'm like, what are you? And she's like, well, I can't. And then he's like, oh. And he's like upset. And she's like, no, I'm like going to my mom's. And then
Yeah.
in the most bizarre twist, she's like, would you like to come along? And he was like, I would. And I'm just like, excuse me, what?
You'll go meet her mom before you go meet her lady parts. Like that's.
Right?
Are you gonna ask
I'm just,
permission?
are you courting her? Is that what's happening? Like,
Yeah.
what is going on?
Are you trying to figure out if this is gonna be a good alliance?
Do you
Maybe.
need to broker an alliance with her mother? Is that what's going on? Does
I
your
think so.
father, the mayor, need to call her mother at the commune?
Yes, yes. I
So,
require 2 goats, a chicken, and
and organic vegetables,
yes, please. And at least 5 orgasms.
right?
That'd be
I'd
nice.
settle for one at this point in the
I'd
book.
settle for it. Yeah, just more, please.
Correct. So in the next interview that Alice has with Margaret, we learn that like Margaret had a big life of luxury. We are now to the point of her story where like she's kind of born. So that felt like more relevant. And her parents were super in love and attentive until they started fighting. And then she would go days without seeing her parents. And I'm just like, that is really sad for a child. Like there's zero excuse why that happens. Um, and then her family went to the Nicolette right before they got divorced. And it made me think of my parents are divorced. This is it's it's like comical now. It was not funny when I was like 7 or 8. But that is what I think people did is they would be like, "Oh, like my parents did this big Christmas for us." It was like
Like one last
1988.
hurrah.
Yes, where we had this like big Christmas and they had been like fighting and stuff like that. But it was like we got more gifts than normal. Like I remember it very vividly. And then like 2 days later, like they're like, Dad's moving out. I'm like, what? So
That's
that's
such
what
a
it made me.
bomb to be dropped. Oh my god. Like,
So that's what like it made me think of as I was just like, so you went and like we're gonna have this wonderful time, and then like when we get home, by the way, mom's moving out. Like that's what happened. So I think there's probably a lot of kids that were like born in the 70s, 80s, and 90s whose parents are divorced who can relate to that stuff. So her father's reaction to losing the love of his life was to become a womanizer. Could have made a better choice, following in his father's footsteps. And eventually her parents do become friends, but they get married to each other. Her dad marries multiple people. None of them work out really well. Feels very like Hollywood-esque. But her mother never stopped loving him. he just, and like one of the things that we learn is that he just didn't love himself enough and he let the world make him too small for her. And I feel like that was like a really poignant statement because I do think there's a lot of people that fall victim to that where they let everyone else's opinions make them feel not worthy or too small to like benefit from the love that is around them. So,
The book where I feel like is like one that you can truly reflect on for your own personal life if you need to, where it's
yeah.
just like, what is really worth it in this world? Like is your family like who you think it is? And like, is that something that you're worth that's worth fighting for you? And like, you know, all about perspective. But it's books like this that sometimes make you think about that. And you're just like, yeah, like I love my family. I love my husband. My family's worth fighting for. And you see like just the sadness that comes from the other side of that. And you're like, ugh. But anyway, let's talk about Hayden going down to Alice's mom's house because that is an adventure for sure.
Whew.
Road trip, road trip all the way down. Uh, so she confesses to him that she sometimes doubts her job as a writer because of how her mother acts about it. And he, it's confession time. He admits, my parents act similar because they're so proud of my accomplishments of winning a Pulitzer, but it doesn't really seem like they're like proud of what I create. He's like, they only focus on the achievements in life and not really on like the process of getting there. And so we find out here Alice's mom is super excited about Hayden coming to her house because she just loves to host people. She's a people pleaser, very Southern hospitality kind of a lady. And her mom's house is literally exactly what you imagine it to be, given like farming, communal, hippie town, hippie description she shared of her parents. Was not expecting a composting toilet though.
Like
I'm good. I don't
questions,
like an
but I,
outhouse.
right. And I'm just like,
Do we need that?
do we need that? Do
No, I don't want that. I mean, I get
I
it's good for the
nobody
environment and it's good for
nobody
the,
wants that.
but nobody wants to smell
You
bad.
clearly do not live in an HOA.
I do not live in an HOA, and she does not live in an HOA.
No.
I have
Can you?
neighbors who do composting, and I'm just like, ugh, as they walk by. I can't. No, but yeah, does not have an HOA. Well, yeah, she's got the chickens and everything. I would love to have chickens. That'd be fun. So they also are staying at her mother's house. So we're like, okay, I thought you were just going to for dinner, but like now it's more serious. Like you're gonna stay in like her sister's room, like down the hall. And we find Alice's old room is like very much like the 90s threw up in it. There's just like limited two stuff everywhere. And honestly, I was like, I'm feeling this. This is my jam. Like, you got limited two poster over there. You've probably got some like Lizzie McGuire stuff over here, like all sorts of stuff. Lisa Frank things, I'm sure, definitely was in there
NSYNC,
too.
Backstreet Boys.
All of it, all of it.
Yeah.
And literally, I think that's kind of a moment where she realizes like seeing Hayden in her room, like in her house, she's like, I'm falling in love with this dude. Like I haven't known him for very long, but like he's very much already like in my life and like in my home. And uh while they're there, she hears her mother talking about her father, and it just seems to kind of like warm her heart a bit for her mom, seeing like how much the death of her father has like impacted her mom, and she's like, mom really misses him and like doesn't take care of herself as much and like isn't talking about him as much, and like it's sad. And like when Alice touches her mom's arm during like a very like just kind of like real conversation, her mom just pulls away physically from her, and you're like, that's frustrating. um and then Hayden and Alice just can't sleep, and they end up outside like sitting on like a stone bench, and we learn here that like Hayden has always had a problem sleeping and that he feels most like himself when he's alone, so oftentimes at night he just goes for a walk and he's like, nobody's looking at me, I'm not the mayor's son, like I can just be me. And you're like, okay, okay, sure, yeah, that makes sense. But you're just like, why are you both awake right now? Go to sleep.
And I was just like, I know a couple things that could help with sleep.
Yeah, orgasms.
I guess it's
Try that.
science.
It's
Try that.
science.
It's like
Yes.
that's what I would have inserted here.
Hmm.
But
Or
during this
something else.
conversation, or well, that led to that.
But that leads to it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So Alice shares like her mom doesn't care about her work, and I think this is like one of my like most heartbreaking but favorite lines of the book. She says, "I think she loves me because I'm her daughter, but I've never felt sure she loves me because I'm me. Does that make sense? And I was like, oh, if you have a complicated relationship with like your mom or your dad, this I think makes a lot of people feel very, very seen. It was like it really, that's why I said like this book I think could change your life because I think that if you have some of these relationships that are very complex and complicated and you have some of these feelings, this book kind of forces you to like
Think about.
deal with them, think about
Yeah.
them. It kind of like if you have scab like wounds that you've scabbed over, it's going to rip the scabs off.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but somehow they end up falling asleep together without orgasms on this
Oh.
uncomfortable bench. And then
Oh.
like her,
I'm like, no, no.
I'm also like, how do you fall asleep on a stone bench?
Yeah,
No,
no.
thank you.
That's no.
So, anyways, like her mom comes out like the next morning and then they're like, oh, she's like, I'm gonna do things with the chickens or whatever. But Alice goes to like work in the garden with her mom
Yeah.
and she's like, oh, well, Hayden gave me one of your stories. Your writing has come a long way. And then, but you could be doing anything. And I was like, bitch, please. Like, oh my God. I've heard people say that things like to me before where they're like, oh, like you're doing so well there. Like, but you could have done this. Or I thought you wanted to do this with your career. And I'm like, thank you for bringing up what I wanted to do when I was 16. I thought I wanted to be a newspaper journalist at one point. That would have been a poor decision now. Like it's
It almost feels similar to like when somebody like brings up someone you used to date in the past, like, whatever happened to that nice boy back in whatever? He was so sweet. And you're like, Mom, he was terrible. What are you talking about? You hated
like
him
which
back then. Like, what? You know?
right.
And it's like, you had such promise. What happened to you?
What
Like,
happened to you? Why are you not living up to
thanks.
your worth? And I'm just like, why are you being a bitch right now?
Yes,
Oh,
seriously. At that point, you're like, why did I come to visit you? Like,
why am I
bye.
here? I hate it
Bye.
here. I want to go to a secret garden in my mind, not an
Yeah,
actual
bye.
garden with you where you pretend to tell me where you tell me how horrible I am. So this is what Alice did the classic. I would say like you have a complicated relationship with your mom. She might be a narcissist, and you're just like and shutting down and leaving this like scenario. Like I am not engaged. Do not engage. Walk away.
Yes, walk
That's what
away.
she does. So when they leave, Hayden is like, he can sense that like Alice is angry and frustrated. He's like, I know you're angry with your mom. And she's just like, I don't want to talk about it. Like, I think if you've been in that situation, like, you can't just talk about it because it is all consuming. It is easier to, and this is not healthy. So I don't advise
Don't
this,
advise this.
but it is
Yeah.
easier to like shove it all down than it is to like deal with it. And that's why I said this book, I think, forces you to like think about some of these things. And
Or maybe
then
go to therapy and deal
or
with it
go to
there.
therapy, right? Or deal
Yeah.
with it there.
Yeah.
But she's like, I don't want to talk about it. And then she tries to be like, well, your concern is more about like how you feel and your own upbringing related to me. Because right when we're hurt, we hurt other people. Also not healthy. And then he accuses her of lying to herself. And I'm like, and pretending the world is full of rainbows and butterflies. And like, she's smarter than that. And I was like, oh, no, you didn't. I read that, I was like, oh, God, you did not want to unleash that. And she's like, oh, you can play this game. Well, I should have known better than to bring a man I barely know home. I was just lying, pretending to myself you were someone else. And I'm like, shit.
We can't take back our words.
We
Once they're
can't,
out
people.
there,
This
it's
is
like,
why
uh,
before my kids went to middle school, one of the things I did is I got a plate and I got a whole tube of toothpaste.
yes, I
And
was gonna say the toothpaste thing. Uh-huh.
yeah, and I squeeze, and I was like, so every time like you say something, like some toothpaste comes out, and I was like, so they had fun. I let them do it, and I was like, just say like, just talk and say things, and they were just like rambling about weird stuff, and they squeezed the whole thing out, and they're like, oh, I go, okay, I go, now put it back in. They're like, I can't put it back in. What do you mean? They're like, do you want me to cut it open? I was like, no, like stick it back through the hole, and they're just like, is this like a test? Like what? And I was like, no, it's like your words. Like once they're out, they can't go back in. And so
It's
I
like
was
you
just
can
like,
try and
oh,
try and put him back in, but it's never gonna be the
but you
same.
can't.
Yeah.
And
So it's like
so
your words matter.
words very much matter. So she drops him off at the hotel because like they drive the rest of the way in silence. Because like what else do
Yeah.
you say after you've both thrown daggers at each other? And
Yeah.
then he tells her
Oof.
goodbye, which is different because he like previously been saying goodnight. And I'm like, oh, it
Ugh,
felt
that's
very
not
like
good.
it wasn't the third. Usually, like in a lot of contemporary romance, we get like a third act breakup. This is not like a third act breakup. This is kind of like a little like second act breakup. And then we
Yeah,
also get a
yeah,
third act breakup.
yeah.
So,
It's on again, off again, on again, off again. You're just like,
yes, it was. I was like, please
oh
don't
my
give
God.
Theo vibes. I mean, that's kind of
Yeah,
what you're like. You try harder than Theo, but you're
yeah.
also, you should be better, Hayden. Be better.
For people who are writers for their profession, they need to be a little bit better with their words and communication there
Correct.
to each other. Yeah. So going back to her writer aspect now, Alice has another interview with Margaret, and we learn a couple other extra things here that Hayden does not like to talk about himself with Margaret. So I'm like, so Margaret's asking him questions to get to know him. Very interesting.
Yeah.
And Alice reiterates that Margaret can trust Hayden. She's like, he's guarded, but he can be trusted. She still says this after the argument that they had. But I think, she's feeling some regret about what she said. And we find out, through her past, Margaret loved attention from anyone. She like lived for that limelight. While her sister on the opposite end, Laura, she did not. She was like, I want to get away from all the attention. And so then to kind of help like protect her sister, Margaret would just do extra things to make sure everybody looked at her and like didn't look at Laura. Which is like kind of sweet. Like you're protecting her, but at the same time, like this isn't gonna work out. Um, so Laura develops a really close relationship with her grandfather, Gerald, after Ruth's death, the tragic death, and ends up basically becoming his primary caregiver towards the end of his life. Remember, they all live in this mega mansion all together, but Laura's just over in his wing, taking care of him, reading his journals, like lighting his cigars, like just being really sweet and loving. Which you're like, okay, you know what? Maybe he deserves that at the end of his life. I don't know, maybe not, but it's sweet of Laura. He shows her heart. And then Margaret, meanwhile, becomes the tabloid princess. And again, just does things to get her pictures and papers. She wants to have a big life. And that's kind of where we leave off when we find out there's a storm that is heading for Georgia. And Alice, like, grew up around there. So she's like, I know what I got to do. Get some supplies, hunker down, my little, Airbnb rental. But she forgets to charge her phone. And when she basically goes to try and like plug it in and stuff, the power goes out. And she's like, great. And then all of a sudden she hears this banging at her door. And she's like, that's weird for the storm. It's Hayden. He just shows up at her front door in the middle of the storm because he couldn't get a hold of her. Margaret couldn't get a hold of her. And he was just freaking out and like super worried about her. And you're like, oh, like you do love her. That's so sweet. And they both like apologize to each other for what they said in the car ride home. And, he starts to open up to her like a lot during the storm. He shares that his mother had really bad depression and anxiety, and that his father wanted to keep it all hidden until like she suddenly almost overdosed and had to go to an inpatient treatment center. And so basically for him, he's like, my mom acted all fine in front of me. And he's worried. He's like, for people to act like that and then like I have feelings for them, he's like, I don't want you to pretend that you're fine all the time. Like I want to know when you're not okay. So he's like scared basically that like, what if that happened with you and I didn't pick up on the signs and like something bad happened. But then, as it always happens after you have these moments of clarity, things start to get a little hot and steamy again. And it goes a little bit further than previously, but they still don't have sex, to all of our frustrations. But they do get a little down and dirty. He does, return the favor and stuff. Mm-hmm. And Hayden then is worried. He's like, I don't want to have sex with you because I'm worried you won't feel the same way about me if I get this job. He's like, if Margaret makes her decision and I get the job, like you're gonna just break my heart. So I don't want to have sex. So I'm like, okay, but like,
But
just have
also,
sex. Just do it. Just you'll figure it out later. She's like, I will still love you. I'll still be with you. And you're just like, but
trust what she says.
yeah, so
So
frustrating.
after the storm, Alice has like a bunch of missed calls and texts from her mom and worries like, oh my God, like something has to be wrong with my sister. Nope. Her mom's just like worried about Alice in the storm. She's like, I didn't even know where you were in Georgia. Like, do you have any damage? And I'm like, can you not communicate better, woman? Like,
Yeah. And she's just like, well, you should have charged your phone. It's like, thanks. Hindsight.
Hindsight 2020.
Just the path, not even passive aggressive. It's just flat out aggressive. And you're like, and this is why we don't have a good relationship.
Yes.
Because of how you treat me.
Correct.
Thanks so
Like,
much.
I get that you were concerned, but you continuing to call does not make you less concerned.
Yeah. Also, I'm a grown woman. I don't need to answer your phone.
Right? I will respond to you when I want to respond to you. Thank you. So during the next interview with Margaret, we learn a couple of different things. So Jody still isn't around. And Margaret's been like very vague about what's going on with Jody, except like maybe she needs a break. And I'm like, okay, is she on a vacation? Is she sick? Like, what's going on?
What's going on with Jody?
Is she okay? Like, who is taking care of you, Margaret? How are you getting your groceries?
Yeah.
And so we also kind of get back to Margaret's story, and she is convinced Laura to go out because Cosmo Sinclair, who is like kind of like the pre-Elvis, is how I would describe him, and is like Laura's favorite musician. And there's a concert coming up, and she's like, I've done all this crazy stuff to avoid us being seen since you don't want press. Like, we're gonna like hide in the back of someone's truck and like just really
wear these wigs. Yeah.
Like very outlandish stuff. And they have like a really great time at the concert. And then there's like the stampede because like he's like grabs a girl's hand and is singing to her, and everyone like rushes to the stage, and they both like get injured. But then they've kind of like not come there with their normal driver. Their normal driver shows up and a security guard and helps them get out. But they can't, like, the press still sees them and takes photos. Well, while they're at their concert, their grandfather, Gerald, died, which is how, like, the driver knew to come get them, where they were at, because Laura told her grandfather that before they left. And Laura is devastated that she wasn't there when he died. And then
like, you feel bad, but you're also like, you have to live your life.
You have to live your life.
Like, he would have understood, you know? He's like, I'm glad you're living your life.
I think so, too.
You know?
So the press makes it seem like they're out partying versus being like at the bedside of their dying grandfather. Because I don't think any of them knew he was going to die that day. Like, they did not go, my grandfather might die today, or I could go to a concert. Concert. Like, this is why I hate headlines sometimes, because I feel like it's just complete bullshit.
Yeah.
So then we have like another later that night, like Hayden and Alice have, I'm going to start calling these quasi dates because they're making plans. There is physical things that are starting to happen. And they briefly talk about their experience with Margaret. And the thing that comes out is Hayden's like, I think we're having very different experiences, but I'll tell you more when it's over. And I'm like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Because like
he makes
like he kind of alludes to like that he'll ask questions and she's kind of like invasive. And Alice is like, yeah, I don't ask questions. She just talks to me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, maybe like she trusts Alice more. It's just kind of interesting. You don't think much about it because everyone does have a very different style with how they communicate. So I'm like, well, maybe Hayden goes in. I just imagine him being like very buttoned up and he's like, here's my 20 questions for the day. Let's go through them. Number 1. Whereas Alice is like, hi, like, what do you want to talk about? Anything.
Yeah.
And
how are your feelings?
How are you feeling
today? What's your favorite color?
So then we have the next steamy encounter that is hotter than the last one. So like we are slowly like inching up on the scale. We are still not getting sex. We are still wanting more. They're still wanting more. And then we get this scenario where Hayden tells Alice he's in love with her. But he's like, I don't want you to say anything back until after Margaret makes the decision. And I'm like, first of all, you don't get to determine what I say and when I say it.
Right? Yeah.
Like, I get that you don't want that gut reaction. And then I'm also like, I did not expect this, Hayden. It's been like 3 weeks and you're in love with her?
I know.
That was fast for your personality type.
Yeah.
Not for Alice, but for you.
Yeah. It was really, really, really fast for him. And you're just like, what? So
see, but I feel like I say that and then I'm like, I pretty much met my husband and knew I was going to marry him.
I mean, same. Yeah, I knew within like a month or 2 of dating my husband, I was like, I'm going to marry this guy. So okay, you know, a month in, sure. But still, I'm like, you haven't had a whole lot of time together. But anyway, So Alice then runs into Cecil again, and he mentions, he's like, "Hey, I found a photo of myself like from way long time ago with long hair, and like Hayden was asking about it. Like, can you tell him? Can you tell Hayden?" And she's like, "Yeah, I promised to tell him," but she's also like, "Why? Why is this important? Like, I don't understand." Seems like not a big deal, but it turns out to be a really big clue in the story. And so she mentions it to Hayden, and he won't tell her about it. And he's like, "You ask Cecil. You should ask Cecil to see the picture. I won't tell you." And we're like, okay, is this just like another like ploy to like the whole interview thing? I was just like, I'm like, what? It's a
It's
picture
like a
of a guy with
treasure
long
hunter.
hair.
Like, what?
Yeah. I was like, this is dumb. But I'm like, okay, well, what's important about this picture? But then I'm thinking, like, is he like related to the family? I'm like, is he like a son or a long lost? Is he Cosmo in disguise? Like,
That's
I
what
don't
I
know.
thought. I was like, I'm
Yeah.
pretty. He's Cosmo. He's not dead. Oh my God.
Yeah.
This is like all those conspiracy theorists who think
Yeah.
Elvis is not
Seriously.
dead. I was just
Yeah.
like, what?
It was going crazy. I'm just like, what's going on? So during this next interview with Margaret, Alice is like, all right, I'm going to bring this up. Kind of. Cosmo shows up the next day to offer his apologies and invites them to his last concert. And, Margaret is super entranced by him and agrees to go and ends up sleeping with him that night. You're like, oh, girl, you did not hold back. But, she's also kind of just like a man eater, I guess is what you would say. The opposite of
Probably.
womanizer, but a dude.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, I mean, I can sleep around. Like, I go out with celebrities all
Whoever.
the time. Like, I'm like, I guess he's my newest, like, fun thing. And, they occasionally would talk. Like, Cosmo would, like, send her letters over a few months, but she just didn't respond to them. She's like, you're a celebrity. You don't care. Like, and also, like, my sister is, like, distraught, like, even listening to your music now. Like, she can't do it. So she's like, for the sake of my sister, I'm going to distance myself. And then all of a sudden, like her sister becomes like completely obsessed with this like very controversial psychologist, Dr. David. And she keeps like talking about how like, oh, I've been writing letters with him and he's like helping me fix my life. Margaret's like, cool, I guess. Like you seem happy. Like, sure, I guess you can keep doing that. And then Margaret, a few months later, runs into Cosmo at a party. And it feels like the whole world stops. There's like a legit picture of like him like looking at her and her just like looking back at him, just like, and that's like one of the cool headlines, like the world stops. And you're like, uh-huh. That's when they clicked for sure. So he comes to see her the next day and asks her to dinner. And then the next night, Laura then is like, you know what? You need to go live your life. Like, if you want to date Cosmo, like, do it because you want to. Like, don't hold back because of me. Like, I'm fine. I'm good. And so they go on their little date, and like, literally, Cosmo's like, I think you should marry me. I think we should get married. And she's like, what? No, we should probably date first.
Like, you don't know my middle name. He was like, what is it?
Yeah. He's like, I want to know. She's like, it's Grace. He's like, my
Grace.
middle name is Andrew. Here we go. What else do you want to know? Like, I'll tell you. Check, 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 check. Let's get married. And she's like, that's not how it works. But then they spend like the next 2 weeks together nonstop. And they get married in the courthouse with tons of press present. But they just were like, we're not going to have a big wedding. Let's just go and elope, which is very similar to like what's in her family line. Like people just going and eloping, not big weddings.
It's also very Elvis Priscilla.
Like, we're just going to get married. Okay. So, but then of course they have like a super long, like month-long honeymoon back in his house in like Nashville, Tennessee. And Cosmo, grew up poor and like had to work hard for his money and he hates the press. He's like, I hate like what they're saying about us. I hate like the pictures. Like, I don't like what they're saying about you. He's like, I want to protect you. But she's like, I don't care. Like, I grew up in this world. Like, it doesn't bother me. Just don't read it. But he can't get past it. And they get back to California and they find out that Laura has suddenly left for a treatment with Dr. David and has legit requested that nobody contact her. Like, you guys have been too invasive in my life. Don't contact me. And they're like, that's weird, but okay, like, we'll respect her wishes, like, okay, that's fine. And then basically now we're back with Hayden and Alice, and they're wandering through a cemetery, which you're like, that's kind of creepy. I don't
Right?
know how I feel about this. And we're like, okay, maybe it has something to do with the Margaret story, but doesn't. They're just going for a walk. And Hayden tells Alice that she needs to understand what that picture of Cecil means before she can take the job with Margaret. And we're like, Okay, now what is this picture?
What does it mean?
What part does he play in this story? Again,
Correct.
is he Cosmo?
Is he Cosmo? Is he alive?
Is he alive? Is he like I'm just like what is happening?
That's where I really thought we were going. Like I was like, he's alive. This is the guy. Oh my God. So then during Alice's next conversation with Margaret, we learned that like Margaret tried to respect Laura's wishes for a month. I would not waited that long before writing to her. And then she waited another month and then wrote to her again, didn't get a response. So they hire a private detective who takes pictures of Laura and she's like with Dr. David. Sometimes she's holding his hand and she looks happy, but she's lost some weight. And at the time, we don't know what like Laura looks like a ton. So
Yeah.
I'm like, well, she's lost weight. Is that like
Is that
she's
okay?
good?
Yeah.
Like, okay. Is that like she's lost weight where it's like a scary amount of weight? Like, kind of, you don't think much about the comment.
Yeah.
And then Margaret continues to write her letters. She just stops mailing them because one of the things that Laura says is like every time she hears from the family, it like sets her back.
Yeah.
And then we find out the thing I did not expect that Laura's trying to extort the family for $4 million, or she's going to share what was in her grandfather's journals. And I'm like, what was in those fucking journals? Like, $4 million is a lot of money today. It was even more money back then in this point in the story. And I'm just like, what? And they're like, we'll pay it as long as we
Without
can
a second
give
thought.
it without a second
Yeah.
thought, as long as we can see Laura, which like I kind of get, right? Like, let's see Laura, let's see if we can talk to her. And Margaret decides that she's gonna be the one that goes. So they meet at this like diner, and there's like very strict instructions, almost like it's like a ransom being paid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Margaret's clearly being watched. Laura shows up. She looks horrible, like super unhealthy, thin. And Margaret's like, what do you need to leave? And Laura's like, I can't. He'll never let me go. I belong to him. And I'm just like, oh, damn.
Yeah.
And then Laura like whispers an address, date, and time to Margaret with like no other information. And then this man who's been like watching Margaret comes like to the table and is like takes the money, gets Laura, and is like, you have to stay in the bathroom for at least 10 minutes. We'll know. And I'm like, who else is watching? Super creepy. And then we learn that like the FBI ends up raiding this address. They find a large shipment of illegal guns and they raid like Dr. David's center, same type of thing. Laura was in a cult.
Yeah.
And she's like in a real bad shape. And so they had to bring her back to Nashville to try and help her heal, like away from the press and everything. So did not see Laura becoming like in a cult. At first I was like, oh, she's going for treatment. Like, is this some sort of like super wellness type of thing? And then I was like, oh, no, we're in a cult. Cult's bad.
Bad. That's bad.
Bad.
Bad,
So,
bad, bad.
real bad. So then Alice starts doing more research about like kind of the story of Laura and kind of trying to validate like some of the things that she's heard from Margaret. And she sees a picture of Cecil with a different last name. She's like, oh, but I know him. And then she texts like Hayden, I think she texted him like, holy shit. And he was like, I know.
Yeah.
So they meet up.
At this point, she's seen the picture of Cecil and is looking further. And she's like,
oh, like, oh my God,
it's like the Parent Trap when like the ripped up picture gets put together and you see everything and you're like,
oh,
what?
Right. But what's
we're
crazy,
we're still like, what happened? What happened? What happened?
And they don't really know at this point. They just know like he is not who he said, like he's not fully who he says he is, right? And so they're worried they're both being played by Margaret. And this is where Hayden starts to say like, Margaret doesn't share a lot with me and she cancels at the last minute a lot, which I'm like, she's canceled on Alice once. I'm like, that's very different than what the impression Alice, like I get of Alice's time with her. And they're like, okay, let's both ask Margaret about Cecil in our next sessions. Mm-hmm. And then finally, apparently we can't have sex in the rental house, but if Alice goes to the hotel with Hayden, they finally have sex, which we will talk about. But I was like, thank God, this is the slowest of slow burns.
Oh my gosh. Seriously. I was surprised he even had condoms. I was just like...
I was very surprised because I thought he was like so committed to like holding out.
Yeah, seriously. So I'm like, okay. Like, did anybody hear you in this hotel room? Yeah, because again, I'm like, why not go back to your place? Whatever. At least they did the deed, finally. So during Alice's next interview with Margaret, we find out that Jody is back. I guess until Margaret just pisses her off again. And I'm like, Sounds like a fun relationship. And the press apparently, way back when, thought Margaret was pregnant, which causes Cosmo's fame to rise again, but also results in a much bigger like scrutiny of their lives overall. So Laura, in this meantime, like goes away to Switzerland to get away from the press. And she goes away with like a doctor friend who's just gonna like help her, check in on her and stuff. And Cosmo and Margaret are trying to get pregnant. They're trying to have a baby, but it's just not happening, and it's causing like tons of fighting between them. And then they just realize like, what, why would we bring a child into this world right now? Like, look at what's happening to our family. Like, it's just like we wouldn't be able to even go anywhere with a baby. There'd be paparazzi everywhere. It'd be insane. They're like, is this a life for a kid? And it's really sad. And all of a sudden, Margaret becomes ill, like on a Tuesday randomly, and has like a fever and like aching pain in her sides. And like Cosmo is freaking out, like picks her up and like has his driver like rush them to the hospital where they're like, there's a doctor that we trust who's working. And like the press is like suddenly like right behind them and like following them. And there's an accident. Margaret wakes up. She's told by Cecil, who is the doctor, that Cosmo was in surgery. He had like a collapsed lung. And Margaret says, and apparently I had appendicitis and I had surgery for it, which we later find out is a lie.
Liar, liar, pins on
Not
fire.
true. Not true at all. But then she keeps asking for Cosmo. We're like, where is he? Where is he? Where is he? And Cecil's like, he died.
He dead.
He dead. And like nobody could tell her. So Cecil was the one who had to break the news. And her father pays for the privacy of like the news not to get like released for a while, so they can all just kind of like sit with this for a bit. And Cecil again is the one who breaks the news at the press conference. So we have pictures of Cecil now at the press conference announcing Cosmo's death. And we're just like, oh my God, Cecil, now what are you doing here? Why are you at the fishbowl? Why are you Captain Cecil now? Like, what's happening? But we know, like, he knows Margaret. He knows who she is. Like, clearly, he's in on all this, but he's not Cosmo, apparently. So then Margaret, apparently, like, after all this happens, after the death, goes back to Nashville and apparently just, like, acts like a crazy lady while she's there. Like, she's doing everything to get crazy attention. She wears her wedding dress to the funeral. Just, like, anything she can do to be like insane, she does. And so for 2 years, the only person then she sees with any kind of regularity is Cece. Yeah, 2 years. Again. You're like, wait a second here. Who else disappeared for 2 years and then suddenly had a daughter? So 2 years later, she then moves back into the House of Ives in California. And Cecil and Laura, the doctor, again, and her sister, they end up falling in love and getting married. And they have a daughter. But they raise her in Europe and change their surnames to like protect everybody from it. So you're like, wait, this sounds so familiar. History repeats itself. So Margaret apparently during this time tries to vanish like a bunch in the mid-'80s, but just wasn't successful. Like people just keep following her around. And then all of a sudden in like 2003, this woman shows up to her house and says, I'm your niece and I want to talk to you. And it turns out that was Jody. And what?
Didn't see that.
Laura and Cecil got married, ran away to, Europe, had a baby Jody, but now Jody is coming back, which makes sense. She has a German accent now, right? She was raised in Europe. And she comes to tell Margaret, like, hey, your sister is sick. You need to come see her. And at this point, like, she hadn't seen her since the accident because she was pissed at Laura that, like, Laura didn't come to, like, be with her with Cosmo. She was just like, I'm mad at you. And, like, now you're like, dead to me. But she's like, oh, my sister's sick. I guess I'll make amends.
Eventually make amends, yeah. So now it's time for like Hayden to give his pitch. So he gives his pitch to Margaret for the book, and then he goes to see Alice, and she's like, "Oh, how did it go?" He's like, "It went." I'm like, "That's what I say when it doesn't go well."
Yeah, it went.
And she's like, "Well, what if we do the book together?" He's like, "I already asked that a couple weeks ago, and Margaret said that wasn't an option." He's like, "I
was like, well, maybe that's what they're gonna do, because the whole premise in the beginning of the book was her quoting the quote, like, "There's your truth, my truth, and then the whole truth." And I was like, that'd be a cool like vibe, like have a guy's version, a girl's version, and then like they combine to the real. I'm like, this can still work out. You guys can still be together.
And Margaret's
But
like,
no,
no,
but no.
no. And then he says, I want this job, but there are other things I want more, which I'm like, you mean Alice? Use your words.
Use your words.
So then the morning of Alice's pitch, this is like when it all kind of like starts to really come apart. Hayden finds that small mosaic that she had bought a few weeks ago and is like, what's this? And she's like, oh, it's Nicolette. And he was like, oh, and he looks at it on the back. He's like, that's surprising. I've not seen anyone else spell their name that way but my mom, who was adopted, and she'd already been named Nicolette. And then Alice, like in her mind, it's like she's freaking out. Like it's like exploding bombs going off. Like, oh my God, I gasped out loud.
Yeah, I did too. I was like, what?
What? Are you kidding me? Because there have been no real breadcrumbs up to this point. Like the only thing he really ever says about the book was that his mom like was very healthy because of like not knowing a ton about family history, which you don't think a lot about, right? But I was just like, oh my goodness. So
This
Alice
is like my moment where I was like Mia Thermopolis. I was like, shut
up. You're a prince. I'm a princess. Shut.
Cosmo's grandson? What?
What?
Yeah. Oh my God. I died.
So Alice is like freaking out. She has to go pitch to Margaret. She's like going through all of her notes, like trying to pull this together. And she's a few minutes late because she's just like, I got to figure out how I'm going to do this. And she shows up and she basically like tosses the mosaic at Margaret. And she was like, is Hayden your grandson? And Margaret's like, you have an NDA. And I'm just like, oh, no, you didn't.
You did not.
No. And then we get the story, right? Cosmo and Margaret find out they were pregnant a week before the accident. Only Cecil knew because he's the one that administered the test. She didn't have an appendicitis. She started spotting. Cosmo freaked out and rushed them to the hospital. She went to Nashville, hid out, and basically had her baby, Nicolette, held her for 5 minutes and gave her up for adoption. She was never planning to write a book. She just needed a reason to get Hayden to come to see her because she had tried to reach out to him before. It wasn't working to like try and get him to come talk to her about this potential book. And so having other writers in the mix seemed to be what caused him to do it. She only wanted to get to know Hayden and find out if his mom was happy. Jody is the one that sent the cryptic email to Alice because Jody's a meddler. But now
What's her name's like Linda gets her life back 65 or
yeah,
something like, and it's just
or
like
something like that. I'm like, that's a very AOL name. Like, do you know what I mean? Or like instant AIM messenger is like what I thought about.
So good.
So
oh, Jody.
But now like Alice has spent all like this month with Margaret, and Margaret's like, I think I want to write the book now.
Yeah.
What?
You convinced me. You convinced me I want to tell my story now. You're like,
I mean, not all of it, but.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, and Hayden told me he doesn't want the job because Margaret like wouldn't tell him about Cecil. And Margaret's also like, well, and Hayden dislikes me. And I'm like, well, because you've been lying to him this entire time. Like he has trust issues and you are not helping. And basically we learned that like in the late 60s, so some time after words, like she realized like no one else like recognizes her like in her late 60s. And she went to Georgia to be with her sister Laura for the last 6 months of her life. So they did like kind of reconnect. And then Margaret drops like I think the bigger bomb, which is I'm not going to tell Hayden the truth. And you can't either because of the NDA. And I'm just like, that is a big secret. Like you bitch. You son of a bitch. I was so angry at this point. And Alice is like, I mean, because she loves him and she's like, I can't keep this secret from him. So she gets up to leave and Margaret's like, if you leave, there's no coming back. And Alice is like, well, our choices do matter then. And walks out.
Which is such a mic drop. Just like,
boom.
Boom. Yep. Oh. And like, literally Alice is just devastated because like she can't tell him the truth. But like, again, like she can't lie to him either. He shows up to her rental house and she's like, I'm not taking the job. And he's like, well, I also turned down the job because I'm like, I thought you would do a better job at this. And it's like, and I don't want this thing to come between us. So he's like, you should go take it. And he's like, I know you're lying to me about something. They're keeping something away from me. And she's just like, go ask Margaret. And she's like, you should go back. You should go. You should leave. And that just like breaks her heart. And you're like, but I get it. She can't tell him the truth. She'll get sued for millions of dollars. She can't
She,
afford. And it's just
well,
like,
and she can't be around him, right? Like,
yeah,
there would always be something between, like, you can't have a relationship that has any type of lie in it.
no, no, it's too bad. It's terrible. So she goes back to her mother's house. And after a couple of days, like her and her mom finally talk about what happened. And Alice tells her mom that she's made her feel how she's made her feel like her entire life. And she's just like, hey mom, like, but this is who I am. And even if you don't understand it, couldn't you just pretend for a few days, a year that you respect me, that like you like me? Because I can't figure out how to be anyone else. And it's lonely. It's so fucking lonely being the person who doesn't belong in this family. And you're like,
Dagger, heart, like,
God,
such
so
a
tough.
poignant line, like, or like collection of lines.
And like her mom is just like, oh honey, she's like, I love you and I do like you. I just don't understand you. Like, and it comes apparent there that she's like, you were my shadow when you were a little kid. And like, but as you grew up, like you just became your own person. And like suddenly like your dad was the one who understood you best. And she's like, I tried, but like it was so hard. And then when your dad died, like it was just even harder. And like during that process, they both kind of heal. Like they start sharing more and more stories about her dad. And to make it like a sweeter moment, like her friends who she's been texting with in this group text like show up because her mother invited them. And it's just what she needed. Alice is just like, you know what? I think I want to write a different story. I want to write your story. I want to write the story of my parents. And honestly, I was like, I want to write the story of my parents too. I was just like, oh, this is so sweet, so cute. But at the same time, I'm like, I feel bad for Hayden,
Yeah, poor Hayden,
you know? Yeah, poor
right?
you,
Because,
but also not.
poor, right? It's like all. So she spends a month with her mom, recording like the stories about her dad, like working in the garden, and then like kind of there's a mention that she sends a letter, but we don't really know who. I thought the letter was going to go to Hayden at first,
I thought so too.
right? And Hayden shows up with a letter. It turns out Alice wrote the letter to Margaret. When she tells Margaret about Hayden, like how she can trust him, how she loves him, and while she's already lost him, maybe Margaret doesn't have to. And then Margaret sends a letter to Hayden with her own letter explaining what happened. And Hayden's like, is this true? And she was like, about Margaret's and your connection? He's like, no, that you love me. And she's like, yes. And he's like,
Totally.
duh, like, you're the one that wouldn't let me say it. Hello.
Yeah, you told me not to say I love you, even though I was gonna say it.
And it's very obvious and very clear.
Yeah.
And he's like, I love you too. Like, I'll move to LA, like wherever you want to go. And they decide to like stay in Georgia because now like her and her mom are going to be close together, which is like that happened a little bit too fast for me. But
Yeah, yeah. It's
and
like,
they end up doing what you and I thought maybe they do to begin with, which is they co-write the biography together. It's a big hit. Nicolette is open to getting to know Margaret. Seems like that might just be like a slow process. And then we learn that like eventually Hayden and Alice have a daughter and they name her Laura Grace Anderson Scott, which is named for Laura and for Margaret, which is really sweet and cute. So,
so
I mean,
sweet.
it was
But like
such
the
a
ending, also like
good
the
book.
ending line of the
Yes.
book was
Oh,
just like, so as she's talking about like writing everything, she's like, I'm gonna write like their own story, And she's like, the good, the bad, the magic, and curses, all the blues and grays, right alongside the reds and golds. I tell her the story about a love so powerful it remade the world for her. I welcome her to this great, big, beautiful life.
mm,
You're like, it's the end of
right?
the book. So,
It's so good. Well, and
I
I
got
think
chills.
I got chills too. I think what was interesting about this book, if you like look at its cover and you think about like the other books that Emily Henry writes, like this kind of punched
This
me.
this is the thing, the
Yeah.
glass. Oh my God, I didn't even think about that. I didn't even see that until you just said that. I'm like, oh my God, it is the Nicolette. Bravo, Steph.
Well, but like when you look at the cover and then you like think about her other books and then you read like I thought that's what we were getting. Like I had heard it was a little bit different, but I thought that's what we were getting. I was not ready, like was not prepared to like be punched in my soul and like feel all of the emotions that I did after this book.
I did
But
not.
so so good. Okay,
It was really good. Yeah.
let's talk hot and steamy. This feels like a 2.5 pepper.
Yeah. And the half is being gracious
It
because
is being gracious.
it's very PG-13,
Yes.
Like we got
Yes.
we got a lot of like fun handsy scenes, but like not extreme detail and like
Correct.
so
But it
it's
was
like
like it was open. Like, I mean, you could see that they were doing things on the page,
Yeah. So,
just not very detailed.
yeah, so it's like a two,
So,
2.5. It's okay. So,
yeah.
yeah.
All right. Okay. So chapter 13, we get some handsiness at the car. Chapter 18, we get some handsiness at the beach, which is definitely better.
It
And then I
is.
think once we get to the last three chapters of Hot and Steamy, it like levels up
Yeah.
a little bit.
But I love like in chapter like 13 the car thing where she's like I'm going to kiss you and just like she's like warning him but he's just like I'm already on it. You know.
Like, but also, I'm sorry if I gave you the impression that I am into you because I'm not.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, I was like you motherfucker. You
Right?
make this so hard. It's so rude. So, basically at so when it gets a little bit good like you said like handsy at the beach stuff, she's like then touch me, Hayden. And his hand releases from mine and slides up over my chest, tight kneading. I bite down on a cry as he pushes the fabric down. I arch back, desperate for his mouth to touch my bare skin. Touches me, drags a thumb roughly over my nipple, then catches it between his pointer and middle fingers in a groan. I'm touching you, remember? You're like, oh, you cheeky boy. I love it. And then she says, I gasp at the smooth glide of his fingers over me, my legs parting. His eyes watch me drunkenly as I move myself against him. You're so wet, he says. I know, I whisper. And I'm just like, can you
It's
please?
like over. And I'm like,
But then they stop. Like, like,
you
come
poured cold
on.
water on me. I did not like it.
But chapter 24 then get a little bit more handsy during the storm. And Hayden goes down on her, gives her a nice little orgasm. You're like, okay, okay, I'm feeling that. He kisses his way down my body, lets his mouth chart a slow, purposeful path along the edge of my underwear. Very PG 13. Then finally dipping his tongue under the fabric. I press up into him and he slides the waistband down, bringing his mouth back to me as soon as he can. My lungs struggling over each breath as the flat of his tongue presses against me and colors blaze against the back of my eyelids at the slow, sure movement of his mouth. His grip on my thighs is firm but gentle, careful, like I'm not only delicate but valuable, and it feels as if something inside me is overflowing. Yes, please. Love it. So then we get chapter 26. Hayden goes down on Alice in her rental, and she returns the favor. Oh, I love it when he does this part. In answer, he pulls me by the hips off the counter. And turns me so that my back presses into the cold steel of the refrigerator and thrusts his knee between my thighs, his mouth descending on my throat and his palms raking up my body. Is that a yes? I whisper. His hands pin themselves against my hips as he kneels on the tile in front of me, one hand bunching up my skirt as the other tugs my underwear down. He leans in, his breath warm and his eyes tilted up to watch my reaction as he presses his mouth to me. I forget everything that isn't Hayden in this moment. Me too. And then she goes, and though mentally I really am trying to stop at making out, I find myself climbing down him, undoing his fly, drawing him into my mouth. His hand is gentle against the back of my head, the sounds emanating from him making my toes curl and thighs twinge all over again. God, Alice, I love this. And I pull back. Me too. You're like, guys,
Okay.
come on. Go.
We're so
Go for
close.
it. You're halfway there. And then chapter 30, we get mention of Hayden going down on Alice, and then they finally have sex in his hotel room. So we roll together until I sit up on my knees, then slowly lower myself onto him, my eyes falling close at the hot slide of our bodies together. He folds me over him, kissing me deep, and his tongue stroking into me as I lift myself slowly and sink back down. God, Alice. He grips my waist hard enough that his nails will likely leave marks, but still not hard enough. No part of him could ever be deep enough in my heart or body to satisfy me. I grind myself against him, knot my hands into his dark, overgrown hair, bite down on the side of his neck to keep from crying when he grabs my ass and pulls me even harder against him. He catches my breath in his mouth, and everything in me tightens. I sit back, gasping for breath, and before I come undone. Oh,
So nice.
so nice. But again, it's 2.5
Yes.
spices. Like it's like the thing that would have taken it to the next level is like literally like describing like his
What
mouth
he
like
was
on,
doing.
yeah, it's like putting two fingers inside of me, his mouth on my clit, like all of these things that we like to read in our more spicy content. So this one,
Two and a
not
half.
so much, but it's still, gets your heart racing a little bit, gets your
It leaves a lot to the imagination, I would say.
it does. It does. But I
So,
don't want to imagine. I want to see it.
same. I would like
I
to
want to
see
read it
it in detail in my
in
brain.
detail. Yeah.
Okay. All right, in terms of strong opinions, I think like the main point of this book was really beautiful. Like the story definitely surprised me, made me gasp out loud, cry. I became frustrated at one point. I think I laughed. Like all of the emotions that you want to feel in like a really great book.
Yeah. It was a really, really good book to like read by the pool, specifically.
Yes.
Just like
That's
lounge
where I
it in
read it.
summer. Me too. So great. I sent you pics. It was fun. Also, there was some like weirdness, really, like jumping back and forth with like Margaret's story, like in the past, and we would see parts of it in conversation between her and Alice, and then we would see parts in the chapter formatted with story. So you're like, okay, like this is her reviewing her notes, and then you're kind of like, wait, what is Alice being told when? Might have been part of the whole point that like maybe again that might have been nice for that portion of the book to have the same kind of a structure, but overall like not bad. It's just you had to really keep track of where you were.
Very much so. So I know I read it on my Kindle. You read the physical book. I did not see any trigger warnings or content warnings in this book.
I don't know if
Or
there's any of that.
look,
Any of this book.
and it
But you
could
need it.
use you need some.
You need some.
So, and I do think with this book specifically, some of those warnings would spoil what happens in the story. And
Yeah.
I feel like what needs to happen is authors like should include them somewhere. And maybe it's like a note, hey, there are content warnings or trigger warnings, whatever you want to call them, that may spoil the story. I've included them in the very back of the book if you would like to read them. Because I was really surprised at the number of topics touched on this book that I think could cause people, depending on like how they react to some of those topics, to have a very emotional reaction to the book that was very unexpected.
Yeah. I mean, I did not
So,
expect the dementia aspect, and like that's very personal and triggering for me. And so I was like literally like reading that part where he was talking about Len like going like to the end of his life and about what do I say when I can't remember you? And
yeah,
he was just like, just say you're my friend. Like I cried because I'm like, that's where I'm at with my father. Like my dad is not who I am right now. And it's very like traumatizing. And it's just like, I kind of wish I had a little bit of a warning going into that so I can like prepare myself. But it was part of the book. I'm like, okay, I can move through this, but again, like it caught me off guard, and I
yes.
I would have appreciated
Well,
knowing a
there's
little
just so
bit.
many of them, I think, too,
Yeah.
that I think if there was just like a couple that they didn't tell us about, it'd feel different, but it just felt like it would be impossible for, I think, any adult to read this book and not be impacted by one of those things.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But also like, like we do love a good slow burn that pays off, which this one does eventually, but again, I need some more spice in it. It's just we waited so long for them to have sex and then for it
Yes.
just kind of not escalate beyond that. I was like, felt like a tease. PG-13 when I wanted R or X.
Right.
I was just like,
Give it to
come
me.
on,
Well, and I
give it to
think
me.
that had been like this moment, it felt like, in this hurdle in their relationship that like he was preventing them from getting to. And then they get there, and I felt like we also didn't get anything about their relationship deepening at that point because he still wouldn't let her tell him how she felt. Like it just felt like, yay. And then it was like Margaret drama.
Yeah, and also like the ending felt very rushed. They just very much like, let's clean this up, let's clean this up. They get I don't even mention if they got married, but like like they get back together and like they live here and they have a family and they get pregnant. It's like what?
What
It was just
happened?
like a very fast summary. Not that they needed like a whole like four more chapters to cover that part, but it just was like
Also,
We're
we could
so
have used it.
invested. Yeah, it's like don't skim over these parts. Like, nah. Still a wonderful book, still lovely
Wonderful,
to
wonderful book.
read by the pool. And, like now looking at the cover and realizing like where that came from, like my brain is like, oh my God, that was so cool. I love that. So
Yep.
fun
Lots of little
things for
hidden
sure.
details. Okay, in terms of what's next, if you love this, you probably also would like Happy Place and Beach Read by Emily Henry. Those are my two other favorite books of hers that she's written. Um, Abby Jimenez, similar writing style and spice level. She's like a 2.5 pepper. So you probably would enjoy Just for Summer. And then I'd also recommend if you haven't read Elin Hildebrand's 5 Star Weekend, it reminded me a lot of this book when things aren't always as they seem.
Also, join us next week when we dive into the world of romantasy and discuss The Veil of Blood and Magic by our friend and our lovely author that we love, absolutely, Jade Presley. Can't wait to dive into that. Please join us next time. Happy reading.
Happy reading. Thanks for listening to Late Night Reads. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Late Night Reads Podcast. And check out latenightreads.com for even more information about all the books we're reading. If you loved today's episode, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. And share the show with your fellow book lovers.